So I have, hi, I have a lot on my plate right now and a lot to catch up with all of you. You saw some of the encounters that I've been having, which is nice. It's a good influence for Sophia, but I'm in the middle of a crucible. Coming back here to Wisconsin, the Lord brought me here very specifically, His timing, and I'm beginning to see how His plan and His will and His timing is unfolding. But I am in the middle of a huge crucible, and it is the most difficult crucible I think I've been through since, I've been through a lot. This is a dandy. And I felt really compelled. I'm in the middle of my study right now, and it's amazing how the Lord, I'm only here because the Lord is keeping me here and guiding me. If it wasn't for the Lord, I couldn't do any of this. And I want to post this video and reach out and continue my study with all of you, because I know there's people out there right now who's in the midst of a crisis, who's in the midst of saying, Lord, you get up every morning, you're like, how can I do this? How can I get through this? How can I? I get up every morning here at my mom's house, and I ask the Lord, how can I get through this? It's really hard being here because things are so dysfunctional. Beyond dysfunctional. And you know what I'm talking about, because you who are listening know what family dysfunction is about. You who know what it's like to be through that crucible where you have family members that you love, and there's those that don't know the Lord. There's those who are completely lost. There's those who are delusional. There's those who you know what I'm saying, right? So I'm not going to focus too much on our family and our dysfunctions and all of that. The point is to keep our eyes on Jesus. You get up in the morning, you feel like you can't do it. You get on your knees, and the Lord will, I promise you, He will give you the tools to move forward, because this is what He's been doing every single day. And I'm telling you, it's an hour by hour thing. It's amazing what I'm seeing, because there's some mornings I've gotten up and I have wanted to leave, because, you can actually say, I don't have skin in this game. I really don't. I've got other things. I've got other avenues that I could be taking. But when the Lord calls. So I wanted to read this lesson, because what this lesson is trying to teach us is that even in the midst of these crises, we have to learn how to submit ourselves as Jesus did. And that's what it starts with. It's not just about all of this. In fact, this morning when I was on my knees, I remembered the story of Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Lord just put it in my head. And the Lord said, remember Lot. Remember his wife. Remember how the angels took them out of Sodom and Gomorrah. But remember, Lot was living in this he was living in a very compromised life, surrounded by sin. And it was, Sodom and Gomorrah, that's where he chose to live. He chose, a so-called godly man chose to live in the pit of all that. And you don't think it didn't affect him and his family? And so here he is, and then the angels show up, and they're like, the Lord is like calling him to come out of this pit, come out of this world, because I'm going to destroy this place. He's had enough. Do you want to stay here in this lifestyle? Do you want to stay here in this pit? Do you want to stay here with your sin? And you're exposing your family, and your family now is in the pit of it, because we reap what we sow, even with our family. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and we can see that. I see it here. I see the result of the sins of the father and the sins of the mother and the sins of everybody, and how it passes on from generation to generation. And we have a chance to break it. We have a chance to get out of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Lot had a chance, and so he did. He took it, and he fled with his family. And guess who looked back? Guess who looked back? His wife. She looked back longingly, because she was looking back on the lifestyle. She didn't want to give it up. She didn't want to give up the world. She didn't want to be obedient. And guess what happened to her? A pillar of salt. And so what does that tell us? It tells us that sometimes we're going to have to leave people in our lives, in our families, that are not obedient, and they are going to turn into the pillar of salt. And there's nothing we can do. We are not called to save people. But we all have a choice, and we all have a free will. And when we're in that crucible with our families, we have to stay in a state where it has to be the Lord leading us. Because there's going to be some that we're going to have to walk away from. But the first thing we need to do is die to ourselves. If you are trying to search to figure out what God's will is for you in all of this, in what's going on in your life right now, in the crisis that you're in, you have to know God's will. And that's where this comes from. I'm going to quick. It says here, dying comes before knowing God's will. It says many Christians sincerely seek to know God's will for their lives. If only I could know God's will for my life, I would sacrifice everything for him. But even after promising this to God, we still may be confused about what his will is. The reason for this confusion may be found in Romans 12, 1 through 1. Okay, we're going to look that up, and I have it here. So, Romans 12:1, and it says, I beseech you. So, Romans 1:2 says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is good and acceptable and the perfect will of God. So Romans 12:1-2 is so important if you are questioning what God's will is. And that's why Paul makes this point. He writes this because he's trying to tell us this is how you know God's will. And I'm just going to read what the lesson says. It says, Paul is describing how we can know God's will. And he makes an important point. If you want to know what God's will is, you have to sacrifice first. Oh, that's the key. There's a key to unlocking these things. And even when I read that, I thought, the sacrifice first. And when you go back to 12, when you go back to Romans 12:1-2, it's telling us right there, we have to present our bodies as a living sacrifice. How many times have I preached that this is the holy temple? And do you know how much we desecrate this holy temple by our lifestyles, by polluting it with the food that we eat, by the things that we watch? We pollute it by the things that, everything is a pollution, because Satan is right there offering all these temptations. And this is this belongs to God. And if we can't sacrifice our lives, this living temple, for him, and not be conformed to the world, how will we know his will? We think, how do we know his will then? And if you're having problems understanding God's will, you need to look inward now. Because we keep looking upward and we keep thinking, God, what is your will for me? And now he's saying, no, look at yourself. Are you conformed to this world? Are you making yourself a living sacrifice for me? It says, Paul writes that we will be able to test and approve what God's will is. It says, when the following things happen. And now this is important. Now listen. We have a true understanding of God's mercy for us. We offer ourselves as a living sacrifice to God. Our minds are renewed. It is only the renewed mind that truly can understand God's will. But this renewal hinges on our death to self first. It is not enough that Christ simply suffered for us. He had to die for us. I don't know how many times I have ran into people during an encounters, and I have talked about the sacrifice. I tell people, do you know that it's not just he suffered for us, but he died for us. These are the keys to knowing God's will. And it starts with you. Your mind has to be renewed, because a renewed mind will not be able to take in those things of God. We have to offer ourselves as the living sacrifice. And we have to really understand God's mercy for us. Now, I've been learning that all week since coming here. I've been learning about mercy and grace. He has such abundant grace. The depths of that is just truly outstanding. I could never even come close to his mercy and grace. But when we understand his character, when we understand who he is, then we can have that living connection. And then we'll understand more clearly his will for us. I'm telling you, these are the things that are helping in my life. And you've seen my life unfold before the camera. And it's pretty powerful. And how does that happen? Well, here's the answer now. And then it goes on to say, ask the Holy Spirit to show you any areas in which you are not completely dead. What things does the Holy Spirit need you to give up in order for you to become a living sacrifice for God? And I want you to study that this week. What do you need to give up? If you want to know God's will in your life, if you're going through a crucible right now, if you wake up every morning and you don't get why you're where you're at and why you can't get through it, or where is God? And what is your will for me? Do I stay? Do I leave? Do I take this job? What do I do? Do I stay in school? Do I go to school? Whatever it is. Whatever it is. Now you have some keys. So meditate on Romans 12:1-2, because the answers are beginning to unfold.